So we're live. All right. So welcome to I believe it's the 6th episode from my Coding with Mitch podcast. I interview usually developers, sometimes entrepreneurs. Today I got both. I have a expert web developer. I'm going to call you an expert because if anyone's an expert, you are, I think. He's also an entrepreneur. He's a YouTuber. He's a podcaster. He's everything that I want to be personally. And to start off, I think it would be good if you talked about these specific technologies that you work with usually, and then tell us your story. How did you get to where you are today?
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Wes. I'm from Canada, and I work primarily with JavaScript and CSS. It was more specifically, I've been a Node developer on the back end for, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years now, maybe even more than that. Like when Node first came out, when it was first announced, I jumped right on it, which I was very lucky that it actually panned out. On the front end, I do a lot in vanilla JavaScript and I do a lot in React. Most of my production stuff is built in React. And I build web development courses. So I've got a bunch of free ones on vanilla JavaScript, on CSS Grid, on Flexbox, and I've got a bunch of paid ones on React and GraphQL and ES6 and backend Node dev. So kind of all over the full stack area that we talk about. And then what was the other question? How did I get here?
Yeah. Yeah. How did you, I want to know your story. Now that you've told us about the technologies that you do, we're going to unpack a lot of that other stuff. But first, I want to start with how you started programming. Like, did you start programming in high school? Did your dad or your mom introduce you to programming? How did you suddenly decide to start slanging code, I guess is the way to put it.
Yeah. So I was a hardcore kid growing up. That means like I was super into MySpace. I had the swoopy hair and everything to go along with it. And I was there's just like I don't know. There's a mentality in the whole like punk hardcore scene of just like do it yourself. And I figured out how to design T-shirts and how to design like CD art. Like I would make the actual like jewel cases for CDs. I would design like flyers for bands and shows and stuff like that. And
So very
I was just super,
entrepreneurial, like right from the start is sort of cut you off, but just very,
yeah,
very, you were an entrepreneur right from the get-go. You
yeah.
got it in
Like
your
I mean,
blood,
we can go
obviously.
back. We can go back even further, and I'm selling. Like I used to take the pears from my neighbor's tree and sell them on the side of the road. Like,
Oh man, you're one
um,
of those guys. Holy.
yeah, I'm one of those kids and like burning CDs in high school. Like, the band Sum 41. I'm like, if I ever meet them, I have to hand them a check for a couple $100 because I made a lot of money just like burning CDs and making mixes for people. And, like that kind of kid growing up, that's always trying to hustle a couple bucks out of someone like that. That was me growing up.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was similar, not to that extent, but definitely burning CDs for things, for people. I was more of like I didn't get introduced to programming, so I wasn't super into that kind of stuff. But like mowing lawns, washing cars, that kind of stuff. But that's cool. That is really cool. Right from the get go, just making a buck whatever way you could.
Yeah, yeah, I had a lawn mowing business as well. I've got a flyer for it still somewhere. It's like Wesley Boss's lawn mowing service. It was called, but so like I've always had that, and I've always been super into tech. My dad was in IT, so we always had internet. We always had really good computer. Before like anybody on the block had a computer. Lots of my friends didn't even have a computer, let alone have internet. And I was always just curious, like, how do you actually make these websites? So I kind of dabbled in that. I made a couple like websites. I had like a PlayStation 2 website, which is still up. It's ps20.itgo.com. Um,
PS20.itgo, like IT.
itgo.com. It's
I gotta check
hilarious.
that out.
There was like a huge issue. There's a hit counter on it, 26,000 hits.
PS20itgo.com is hiring.
Yes, because I
You're
couldn't figure
hiring.
out how to like fix the like horizontal scroll issue. So I was like, I better hire someone. Um, and it's amazing that it's still up because that was I don't know when was PlayStation 2 released? Like uh
Oh,
probably 15 years ago.
it would have. I think I was like, yeah, I think probably right around 15 years ago. I think I was like 12. So yeah, 15, 16, 17, somewhere around there. Yeah.
4,000. So 19 years ago.
Uh,
Holy, yeah. So I built my first website 19 years ago, I guess. I think I even built some before then. But like really where it all started was this whole MySpace generation when I was in ninth grade, 10th grade, 11th.
so
And I was making, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so for those of you who don't know what MySpace is, because I know a lot of my audience is young programmers in college now, so they're like, 20.
They weren't even
They,
born yet. Yeah.
they got no idea what MySpace is, so I just want to give you guys some context because I think it's important to his story. So in MySpace, it was kind of the first sort of social media profile website that you could have. So like Facebook, where you could build a profile and tell all your friends about the stuff you're doing, whatever. But the cool thing about MySpace, or no, I'm thinking of Nextopia, but I think it was similar, same sort of thing. You could do the HTML yourself on the page. I don't know if you could do that with MySpace, but you could with Nextopia.
Yeah, you could add your own HTML. You could also at a certain point you could add your own JavaScript, which was
Yeah,
crazy. That's super insecure.
yeah.
But the real thing was taking the table layouts that MySpace had and applying your own CSS to it. So you pop a style tag into your bio field, and then you would skin the entire thing. And I got to be one of these guys who you could hire to skin your band's MySpace because it was big with bands to look like the artwork and the t-shirts that I was designing as well. So that sort of introduced me to CSS. And then sadly, just I think just as I was like entering university, MySpace started to die off. People started moving over to Facebook for their personal stuff. And I don't know what happened to bands then. It was kind of like a weird period for finding new music. A lot of the bands sort of left MySpace and we're not doing that anymore.
I'm trying to think
Um,
of what I was doing. I just remember always downloading music on LimeWire and whatever
yeah,
other. But I don't remember how I initially found out the song names because you got to know the song names if you're searching, right?
yeah.
So
For me, I think I remember it being like a there was like these release like blogspot releases where people would put up new albums on rapid share, and then you just download them on rapid share, and like that's how I found out about new music via these like piracy blogs. um, and it was crazy because like a lot of these bands got huge just because their album was leaked to um, I think it was called It Leaked, and it would show up on there, which is really cool.
Mhm.
um, Anyways, that was once MySpace started going away. I dipped more into the WordPress world, and that's really where I started to cut my teeth in like real web development, where you're doing everything from scratch. You're doing the back end, the front end, all the CSS, custom JavaScript, and whatnot. And then from there, I don't know how much else you want to hear, but from
Well,
there, I just got better at it.
so you mentioned it's got to adjust my camera here. So in high school, you think you said as you entered high school is when MySpace started to, or was it university that you said?
University. So as
Okay.
I was in high school, MySpace got super popular. And I think in grade school as well, MySpace was super popular. So like the kind of the heyday was when I was in high school for MySpace. And I still remember being in my dorm room and doing a lot of t-shirt designs, but I remember that MySpace started to sort of die off after that.
So obviously you took computer science in university then.
No, I didn't actually. I have a business degree that's focused on IT.
Hmm.
It's called Business Technology Management, and it's more of a more heavily on a business. So how to manage people, how to manage change, how to communicate effectively, how to, and then there was a whole IT side of it of like networking. Like I majored in think it was telecom, was it? Something like that, or SAP stuff. So like I know how to like calculate an IP address and network computers together, and how to put together these big like SAP, which is what's used for like sourcing materials across the world, purchase orders, things like that. But we never actually had any coding classes. I took one or two small little coding classes as an elective, but all of my coding skills were self taught
Oh wow. So you
over the
got you
years.
have a very wide range of valuable skills by the sounds of things. You have business skills, but I mean, you were an entrepreneur from the get go, so you have lots of experience in there. You developed your coding skills by yourself, which personally I think is the best way to learn to program is by yourself, online resources, and yeah, then business skills. That's pretty cool. That's a powerful
Yeah,
collective, I think.
it's kinda all over. I almost went to school for like, I was super into design at the time. Like, the MySpace stuff was just out of necessity, but I was more into, like, Photoshop and I was, like, really excited about, like, developing packaged goods. And I almost went to school for that, and I did get accepted into this IT program, and I didn't get accepted into it, and I'm kinda glad about that because, I said, "Oh, well, I might as well go this tech place." And even when I entered, I still thought like I'll probably be at, like working at like a help desk or something like that, where because I just love like the hardware side of things, and now it's totally switched around because over the 4 or 5 years of university, I started to get more and more into coding. I was running my own business. I was making more websites on WordPress, and that sort of solidified that, oh, I can actually be a web developer.
Hmm. So did you actually build the PHP behind, or did you just use like WordPress itself to build these websites?
Initially it was all WordPress based, which is great because like I didn't have any skills to build something from scratch in PHP. I hardly knew what I was doing inside of a WordPress theme.
Hmm.
But as I got better and better, and as I got asked for like different applications, I started picking up Cake. PHP was one. Code Igniter, which is more like Laravel is today. At the time, Code Igniter was the big hot one. Spent a little bit of time in Joomla and Drupal, but I remember just saying like to myself, I need to really double down on this like WordPress thing. And then probably I don't know, 3 or 4 years into my career, I decided like, okay, Node was starting to come out. jQuery was really popular. You started seeing more and more demand on my WordPress clients for stuff that was should be done in JavaScript. So I said like, okay, I'm going to switch gears now and just like double down my entire career just on JavaScript, and it sort of panned out.
So you did a lot of freelancing then, by the sounds of things. You know, from the time you were in university or even high school when you were building MySpace pages, you've done a lot of freelancing, right? Like, this is a
Yeah,
question.
yeah. So I've I've only ever had a couple co-ops in school. So in school I worked for like an agency. I worked for ExxonMobil doing some like C development, trying to figure out how that works. Just a couple co-ops here or there, and then I realized like I remember making more money in the evenings of my co-op. I would go home and start building WordPresses, and I made more money doing that than I did at my day job of the co-op. So um, in my fifth co-op, the final one, I convinced the school to let me co-op for myself, which is hilarious because you have to write a review letter. Like you need to get a co-op review from your boss.
Yeah.
So I had to write my own review, which I did great in. Um, and by the time I was ready to graduate, I had this business being run. So I was able to just go from graduating to running this business full time, and I was super happy to be able to do that because
Yeah, I mean, who
um,
wouldn't be? That's awesome. That's like that's so many people watching right now are like, how do I get started? How do I get clients? How do I get started basically? And this is like the ideal situation that you've just described here.
Yeah, it was nice. I think that's like my favorite part of school was the fact that I just had time and the ability to um just like try things out, right? Because like I don't know that I would have taken those risks if I was like if I had not if I just been on my own and I've got rent to pay and things like that. But there's something about being in school where it's fine to just dick around for a bit or try different things. Which was really cool. So that's why I encourage people to do. Like a lot of people are like, oh, I just don't want to go to school at all. I just want to get right into it. And those were some really good years where I didn't have the pressure of life, um, of pushing me to do everything that it is. And I learned a lot at that time, and my career grew a lot during that time.
I know exactly what you mean. I actually, something comes to mind when you say that. I was listening to, yeah, do you know who Jordan Peterson is? You probably do. He's all over YouTube.
I've heard of him only because I think he's Canadian.
Yeah, he's Canadian. He's a psychologist, but he's a famous psychologist now, I guess you would call him, famous on YouTube. And he said something uh, along the lines of what you just said. He said people should use those years they have in university because they have an excuse. They have a high class social title during that time, meaning they're a university student. They can walk around and tell people, I'm a university student. It's like really it means you're nothing, but you are something. And so it's an excuse. It's a social excuse to do whatever you want, really, and it can be used for a lot of good because
Totally.
you can try whatever you want. And nobody's going to judge you. No one's going to be like, oh, that guy's just wasting his life doing nothing. Whereas if you tell someone you're an entrepreneur and you're 19, an adult, a normal adult, the average adult is going to look at you and say, oh, so you do nothing, where, whereas if you are a student and you're in university, you say, I'm a university student, and there you go. They have instant sort of respect for you, as opposed to the latter where you tell them you're a nothing.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So anyway, where were we? Oh, I know. I have a good question now because you've done so much freelancing. I have a lot of people who, like I said, ask about freelancing, about how to get started with freelancing. What kind of advice would you have? It sounds like this has been a long process for you, and you've kind of built up to all of your freelancing clients. But if someone was just trying to get started, what kind of advice would you have for them to get clients and to get started?
Uh, yeah, I think the two big things that everyone is looking for and can never find is somebody who's super dependable. There's a lot of sketchy people out there. Developers are not great at communicating, things like that. So it's hard to find someone who you can actually trust and put your money into. And the second is like get really good. Like there's no better way to run a successful business than to be really freaking awesome at whatever it is that you're doing. So like you will have no problem pulling in unlimited clients if you are very good at what you do. There obviously are tactics out there that you can use to get more clients and whatnot. But in my case, it was simply just being pretty good at what I do. Like it wasn't amazing. Like I was still fairly new at it, but like I was pretty good at WordPress. I sort of specialized in WordPress at the time. And I went to a lot of meetups and stuff like that. I got to know a lot of the people in my industry. I did a lot of blogging about it. And then people sort of just know you as like, oh, we need help with WordPress. Better call Wes. And a couple of years in, I switched that to JavaScript, and I became the guy that you call if you need help with JavaScript or front end in general. And sort of specializing in that, I think, is probably a key because even if you aren't really good, being perceived as being pretty good at what you're doing, I think will attract a lot of clients to you.
Okay, you said a lot of very valuable things there, and I want to highlight them for people who are watching. So number one, be really good at what you do. That sounds like cliche advice, but it's actually really, really, really good advice. Like get tunnel vision in your thing that you want to be good at, and people will start looking at you and looking for advice, and then that's where the clients come from, probably most of the time. Another thing is he said he blogs and he talks about what he does. So that's how you build that perception. That's how you get out there and you show people that you do know what you're talking about. And even if you aren't the best, because I'm not the best, Wes isn't the best, but a lot of people probably look at him like he is the best JavaScript guy out there. I looked at his websites, I looked at his YouTube. I'm like, this guy looks like he knows what he's talking about. This is serious. and that's the perception thing. And what was the last one? Meetups. So he said he goes out into his community and he gets known. That's another way. Blogging is sort of the internet path. You have to build that internet reputation, and then it's always good to get to know people because number one, they get to know you personally, and then they're gonna, yeah. I mean, it's getting to know you personally, and it comes back to that dependability thing. When you meet someone personally, you're intuitively going to automatically think that they are more dependable just because you've seen them personally, as opposed to meeting them on the internet.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, that was good advice. I'm out of breath there. Jeez. Let's see here. So overall, how long have you been programming for?
Well, PlayStation 2 came out 19 years ago. So
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right.
no, but
Okay.
I like seriously programming, like being I would call myself a web developer, maybe like 12 years or something like that, 12, 13 years. So I've been going at it for quite a while.
And so you didn't take programming in school, so you don't have uh, that perspective. But what uh,
No.
what do you think is the best way to learn how to program personally? Like tactically, like really specifically, how what do you think is the best way to approach learning to
Yeah.
program?
Um, uh, I think that you can get a primer. You need to get your primer in whatever it is. So let's take web development. So you're going to need to learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And whether you do that on your own, taking a bunch of courses online, watching some YouTube videos, or going to a boot camp. I think boot camps are awesome for that kind of thing because it gets you up to speed really quickly. Or going to school for it. I think that's totally fine as well. It's a little bit of a slower path, but we just said it's probably worth it. So there's that. And then I think that once you have your primer, you're not going to be very good. You're just going to have a primer, and you're not going to be able to. Like if you were to sit in front of a text editor and say build a website or build an app, you might just go like, I don't know where to start, right? So like, how do you get good? The really my whole mantra on in life is just like to build a lot of things because um, people ask me like all day long. I get like tweets and Instagrams and email from people that they're looking for advice in their situation, and people think that they're in like a very specific situation where they've learned some things and now they feel frustrated that they can't move ahead as quickly as they want, or they feel like maybe it's not for them, or maybe they feel other people are so much smarter than them, and they see other people at their boot camp who are just getting it and it's just clicking with them easy. And that's everybody asks me that same advice all the time. And the reality is that you just need to go off and start building lots and lots of things. You need to build lots of websites. You need to build lots of little components. You need to do lots of demos. And through that process of making a lot of things, you are slowly going to get the skills that it is that we call a programmer. And I don't think that there's really any other way to go about it. There's no tricks, there's no hacks, there's no YouTube. You can watch YouTube videos till you're blue in the face and like read Reddit threads about people who got a job. And there's a sort of romantic um, idea of just like loving the whole idea of being a programmer, but until you like sit down and do the work, you're not going to really get anywhere.
I think you couldn't have said it better. Like, yeah. I mean, I get the same thing, obviously. Like, how do I get started? What's the best way? People are always looking for the shortcut. They're looking for the hack. They're looking for it's a shortcut. It's they want to become a programmer now. They don't want to spend the 2 or 3 years that it legitimately will take to get
Yeah.
good. And and like you said, I don't think there's a way to shortcut it because it's a skill. It's like how do you get fit? You go to the gym every day for or 5 days a week for 3 years, and you'll probably be a lot more fit by that point.
Yeah.
It's not something that, and yeah, I get also what you said. A lot of people think that, oh, everyone else is getting it faster than me. Everyone else is getting it. They're in a boot camp or they're in school or whatever, and it appears like everybody or people are better than them, but they're not. They probably just spend more time. They know the thing that they're studying at that point better because they've seen it before or something.
Yeah.
It's not.
There are people. I'll say as well. There are people that are going to be better than you. There's a lot of people that are better than me. There's a lot of people that started programming. Like there's people that work at Facebook that work on React, and they were born in like 1995. And like I'm way older than that, and I've been programming for longer that they've been around, and they're way smarter than I am, and that's okay. I'm totally fine with that because like I'm good enough at what I do, and I'm able to make a living for it. And just know like it's hard to compare yourself to those people, but um, there are people that are going to get it much faster than you, but that doesn't mean that you can't necessarily do it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's always going to be exceptions of people that stand out for sure. Um, Always, no matter what. But yeah, like you said, it might take you a little longer. So what? It might take them 5 minutes to learn something. It might take you 20, and then you extend that across 5 years. It might take you 5 years to learn something, it might take them 2 to 3. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just the way it is. It's the nature of learning something new. So I just realized something. I
Yeah.
had this video on private this whole time, and
Oh,
I just switched it to public, like kind of midway through when you were explaining that. So shame on me. So
oh,
you
that's okay.
you tweeted to all those people, and then they probably came to the video, and there was nothing happening.
Oh, here,
So
I'll send a follow-up. One sec.
so anyway, we are live now, and yeah, I mean, I want to do an introduction almost again, but let's not do that. Um, yeah, so now what are we going to talk about? So you have a lot of different websites. So now I'm gonna ask you some entrepreneurial questions. So
Sure.
sort of selfish actually, because you essentially do what I do, but you're way more successful. So let's ask some questions like that. So you have a bunch of different websites. Why do you break up your content into different websites as opposed to keeping it on a single one and having kind of all of your courses or all of your videos?
Yeah, I get this question all the time. People think like, "Oh, like what are you doing that you have a separate domain name and you make a separate product for everything that you do? Isn't the way to do it to put it all into one website or maybe like charge monthly for it or anyway?" And like my whole um thing has always been make it a thing. That's my mantra for building anything, whether it's like I wrote a blog post the other day about, or like a year ago about email. And instead of just making it a blog post about email, I called it the breakout email management system. And it's fun. You can make a logo for it and you can make it a thing and put it up online. And for my courses, I think that it gives it a higher perceived value. Because like I know the content is really good, but I want to just like put it across as this entire thing and not just like a forward slash React on my website where it's just like it's just a little course that I've done or whatever. I want to make a new design for everything. I want to show people that I've put in a lot of effort into building this thing, so it's on its own domain name. So that's just kind of how I've always done it, and it's taken me a little bit of work to make a course platform that will work on multiple domain names and stuff like that because it's tricky when you have multiple domain names, but it's always worked really well for me. I know that there's people that do it totally different than me, and it's working for them as well. But I've always been happy doing my own domain name. Plus, I really like this probably stems back to my like MySpace days, but I really love the making a new design for everything, and making a new domain name and finding new music for each of the tutorials. And it's just like kind of a fun way to express some creativity that I have.
You like to
When
start fresh,
sometimes, yeah,
basically.
totally.
Yeah. You like to, start you're doing something new, you like to, like, really make it new. Like, everything is different, by the sounds of things. Sounds just like a really creative thing that you like to do. You said you're a very creative person, obviously.
Yeah, yeah, it's fun to do that, especially like when you're writing code all day. Code is creative, but there's something really nice about selecting a perfect font and getting the colors and doing a layout and playing with it. Especially when like I also know like the border of what is possible in the browser, so I always try to push it a little bit on the layout. Sometimes that bites me in the butt. My last course like spiked the CPU on Safari last time I last time I launched it because I didn't test it properly in Safari, but it's kind of fun to do.
You're pushing the limits. I know what you
Yeah.
mean by like sort of taking a break from writing code, because that's fine, but doing like design work is very different. It's like it touches a different part of your brain is what it does. Because I know when I'm designing an Android course or something like that, and I'm working on back end logic basically for the whole day, for me to like stop and be like, oh, I have this thing on my website that I should work on, to just stop for an hour or two and like work on that. It's like it almost refreshes me, kind of thing.
Totally.
It's
Yeah.
like because for me, web development is almost, it's more of like a hobby, whereas the Android stuff is like a job. Everything has to be perfect. The logic's got to make sense. It's got to perform well. Like I'm always just it's always just like very mentally demanding, I guess. But then when I work on my website, I'm like, it's my website. I don't care. I mean, let's do something that looks cool. Let's see where this goes, and whatever. It's more of play than work, which is a cool thing to do. Take a break.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So I have a question because you know a lot of different web development languages, and you work with a lot of different languages. You've seen a lot of different languages. For somebody who is just getting into web development in 2019, say they've decided tomorrow, 2019 is going to be the year that they learn how to program.
Yeah.
Which language do you think is so obviously CSS, HTML, you got to know those. JavaScript is pretty much also a prerequisite, at least some skills in JavaScript. What else would you recommend?
Oh, well, I actually don't know any other languages. I know a bit of PHP. I could probably limp along on a PHP server, but I wouldn't say that I know PHP. And all I know is JavaScript. So uh, I would say JavaScript, and that's probably also because
Node,
um,
right?
yeah, you can do the back end in Node. A lot of the code you write can be shared on the back end on the front end. I do that all the time. If you need to format something on the back end, you can use the exact same formatter. Like imagine having to write like a dollar formatting library and having to implement that in like Ruby. And
Mhm.
then also it needs to be implemented in JavaScript, but like work exactly the same way. That's really frustrating, right?
Yeah, that would be a
So
pain in the ass. Yes.
I would say go JavaScript, learn Node, learn learn React or Vue. It doesn't matter. That's another thing. People always ask me like, "What should I learn?"
Mhm.
And the real answer is it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. But if you are trying to get a job and you want me to tell you something, I would probably say learn Node on the back end, learn React on the front end, because those are the hot things right now, and those are what people are hiring for right now. But that will probably change in 2 or 3 years, and that will change. But if you need to cut your teeth and learn the fundamentals on something, that's probably worth doing right now.
Yeah, and something I would add to that is don't worry about like learning the wrong thing, like learning something and then in a year or two having to learn a new language. It's going to be much easier to learn that second language, that third language, that fourth language after you've already sort of gotten deep into something. It gets easier, is what I would say, because they all languages follow the same structure. You're doing the same sort of things, and you can make connections between languages, and it gets easier. You might as well accept the fact that you're going to be learning for your whole life if you're going to be a
Yeah.
programmer. Like, make your peace with that because that's how it's going to be.
Yeah, you're not gonna like being a programmer if you don't like the idea that things change. You
No.
see that in a lot of industries where I think every single industry recently has had new, even just like I'm thinking about plumbing. The plumbing industry has new technologies and new products all the time. And to some people that's really exciting, and to other people it's really frustrating because 30 years ago they learned something in school and they want it to be the exact same way.
Yeah, this is I've had sort of heated conversations with like my dad and like my grandpa about this, because they're old school working class people, and they think that if you go to school for something and you learn a skill, you get a career, you do it for 10, 20 years, that you should be guaranteed something. But it's like, no, you always, it's going to be changing. The only thing you're guaranteed is that it will be changing. You should
Yeah.
you should you should be get good at learning. That's what you should get good at, not one skill sort of thing, is what I think anyway.
Yeah, my mom has a time. She's just like one you should a job, and like my dad worked the same job for I don't know 20, 25 years or something like that, and uh, to her that's safe. But to me that sounds super
Super
scary. Can you
unsafe.
imagine
Yeah.
being 20 years into a job and getting
Yeah,
canned?
you
Like,
like
what do you do at that time?
yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I think. And like and not even just canned. What if your industry disappears? What if the thing
Yeah.
like what if the job is just gone? Not just like you get fired. Then what? You spent 20 years doing one thing where you haven't really been learning about anything else. That's not a good scenario.
Yeah, that's kind of scary, and you see that all the time with different industries, and I think it can even happen in web development too. You get comfortable with the tech that you're using, and I hear from a lot of people they're frustrated because their job is using the same tech for 5 or 6 years, and they see the industry progressing ahead, and they feel like they're kind of getting left behind, but their job doesn't really care. Maybe it's a bit of a cash cow business. Maybe the tech doesn't really necessarily matter all that much in the industry that they're in. Even if you're in a job like that, it's important to always just be learning outside of your job, or trying to figure out how you can learn on your job, because this stuff
That's
does move quickly.
that's why you need a subscription on Wes's website. Always be learning new stuff. For those of you who are Android developers, go ahead and check out his website and learn new things. Don't get stuck in Android only. Quick little plug there. So yeah, so learning things. You always got to learn things. Someone just said in the chat actually that we actually have a live chat now because I remembered to make this video public. Drew Clements says, "Get comfortable with being uncomfortable," and I think that's a pretty good way to put it, because learning new things it can be very uncomfortable. I know, like whenever I'm learning something completely new, it's almost like your head is cloudy and everything kind of closes in and it's hard and it's uncomfortable. But then when you get it, when you learn it, the skies open up and you're like, okay, I see now. So getting comfortable with that feeling is definitely important. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think at a certain point, people get spooked, um, and feel like they have to always be on the cutting edge. They look at someone like me who is always talking about whatever the latest and greatest is, and I think at a certain point, you just have to also be okay with it changing and not caring, because you can't spend your entire day learning what's new. You just have to sort of come up for air every 6 months or so and figure out, okay, what's new in our industry. Um, because you, sorry, my wife just turned on the printer. I was like, what is that sound? Um, yeah, I think it's important to note as well, like just be fine not knowing certain things as well, because if you know that you are a competent developer, you can probably scale up pretty quickly should you ever need to learn something new.
Yeah, definitely. I have a personal example too. Like I've done Android for, I don't know, about 3 years now, I'd say, and I really started to learn web development maybe only a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago. And I would say that the time it took me to learn to become like proficient in web development was like a fifth of the time it took me to learn Android. And I'm not sure if it was because web is easier or because I already had all this knowledge that I'd gathered, how backends work, how servers work, how databases work, just like how everything fits together. I think that probably played a pretty big part, because things that I would have got stuck on for hours, it probably took me 10 minutes to figure out.
Yeah,
Um,
you get really good at like debugging and understanding how things piece together. It's like regardless of what language it is, it's usually just servers talking to servers or servers talking to clients, right? You understand the whole life cycle and how data is moved across the internet and whatnot.
Yeah, it's the big picture stuff, because yeah, I remember just learning when you just start. It's like when you encounter something new that you haven't seen before. It's like, oh God, you don't even know what to Google when you're trying to figure it out. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, like building those. I call it Googling skill is what it is. But it's a real thing. Like if you're good at Googling, I get questions all the time where someone asks me something and they said that they've Googled it. I know as soon as they say that, I think I guarantee I'll find something in like 30 seconds. And every time I do, and they're like, "Oh, I didn't see that." And it's because they just don't have that Google skill. It's you got to level up your Google skill. It's important.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot lately. Is like, how do you teach somebody to be good at debugging?
Um,
Um,
one of my friends asked me a question, because he's learning programming, and he asked me a question. He was struggling with it, and I helped him. And he asked me. He said, "How did you find that so fast?" And so I was kind of going through it. But other than that, I hadn't thought about it. But there's ways that you Google. There's certain words that you search. The way I described it to him was Google the symptom, not what you think the answer is. Literally Googling the symptom, because if you Google the symptom, what's going to happen is you're going to end up on a forum or a Stack Overflow post or something where some person has described that issue.
yeah,
So and then you end up, then you go down the rabbit hole. Then you're following links and you go here and there, and eventually you'll find your answer, or you'll find an example that fits your question.
Totally, totally.
Yeah.
Can you hold on one sec? I just gotta unplug this printer.
Sure. There was something that I had to do too, but I can't remember now. I'll open the window because it's getting hot in here. Okay, let's and take a look at the live chat here. We have questions. So are you there? I didn't look. No, you're not there. Okay, I'll look at the questions. So what do we got here? So I'm going to look through these questions, and I'll read out the ones that I think will help the most people if we answer. So don't be mad if I don't answer your question. I apologize. But my last interview, when I interviewed Aiden, we spent way too much time going through questions. I think we did it for like an hour, which is, I don't want this to be that long. I'm going to burp. So let's see here. So Amit Deshwal asks, I'm currently learning JavaScript through the book series named You Don't Know JavaScript. Do you think I need to do anything else? So I personally, I don't think learning using books is a very effective way to learn. I think learning through online stuff, not trying to plug Wes's courses or my courses or whatever, but I think that's the best way to learn. Like, first of all, try and build something. Always have a project in mind. Whatever it is, think of something that interests you. It literally does not matter what it is. Whether your goal is to build a blogging website, build an app that interacts with some API to get some information, like a weather application, it doesn't matter. Something that interests you, have that in your mind, and then go start watching online courses. And as you watch those online courses, take the things that you learn from them, or the things that the author is talking about, and try to implement them in your project. So it's like, it's like watching something, trying to learn it, and then trying to implement it in your project. Looks like Wes left. Maybe he accidentally unplugged the internet. So it's just us. I gotta send him another link to make sure he comes back. Hold on. 1 second here. Hopefully we didn't lose him.
Hey,
Oh, you're back. Okay.
sorry about that. My wife decided to print off like 8,000 things. I turned the printer off and I bumped the router out.
Oh, that's funny.
All right.
I was just answering a question from the live chat, and I'd be interested to hear what you said. So somebody asks, I'm currently learning JavaScript through the book series named You Don't Know JavaScript. Do you think I need anything else? And my answer was, I personally don't think that learning using books is a very effective way to learn. And I described how my opinion is that you should have a project in mind, like something that interests you that you want to build, and then go and watch online resources. So I'm not trying to plug your course, not trying to plug my courses, just saying in general, watching online videos is going to be the most helpful to you, because you need to see,
Yeah.
you need to see the big picture. You need to see you need to see how they think when they're building the thing, because that will help you get into that mind space. And then taking the things that you see in the courses and trying to apply it to this project idea that you have. So you're watching it, and then you're trying to apply it, and you're trying to like make that bridge that gap, I guess is how I would describe it. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think so. The watching online tutorials is probably one of the best and probably cheapest way that you can skill up
Oh yeah, cheap
uh,
too. Yeah.
on your skills. Obviously, it's either going to be free or you pay however much the tutorial is. Obviously, you can learn from blogs and reading the documentation as well. But I think you're going to get huge value from seeing somebody actually implement the thing. And usually, what I see people do is they'll take what I've done, they'll do it with me, and they'll say, "Oh, I wonder if I can do it some other way." Right?
hmm Yeah, exactly. So it's like seeing what you're doing, watching you, and then taking it and trying to use it some other way. I used a project as an example, but it doesn't matter. Just like the process of like taking what you knew and then kind of changing it and putting it into another form. That I think is because then you see the intricacies of how it all works, all the pieces and how they come together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, So yeah, let's check out some more questions if you are okay with asking answering
Yeah,
questions.
absolutely.
I know I had one more question that I want to ask you, but I can ask you later. So let's go through some of these questions. Okay, so we got Kesh K is a Java dev for about 5 years now, but JavaScript always mystifies me, and I'm just not able to pick it up and focus other than when I need it. So when you absolutely needs it, a quick jQuery usage here and there. So it's not really a question. I guess he's just stating that. So what would you say for somebody who's trying to really dive deeper into JavaScript and learn it and stay interested in it as they're
Yeah,
learning it?
it looks like there's a follow-up question here. It says, "How do I get into it?
Oh yeah.
Do I go straight vanilla JS or go into ES6 or straight into React, for example?" I think that if you are you're a Java developer and you're coming to JavaScript, there's going to be a lot of things that don't make sense to you because they are both programming languages, but there's a lot of like gotchas that are different between the two, right?
Gotcha.
So I would definitely, I always advocate for learning enough of the fundamentals to get you up and running. If you dive straight into React, you're not going to know the sort of gotchas that come along with JavaScript. I would say it's hard because people say like, should I go into vanilla JS or go into ES6? And that's kind of an odd question because ES6 is JavaScript. It's just like an addition to JavaScript in the last couple of years. So you need to know all of the stuff before ES1 through 5 before you learn some of the ES6 stuff, but also like some of the ES6 stuff is now just part of the fundamentals. So like I'm creating right now a beginner JavaScript course, and I'm not going to say like here is JavaScript and now here is ES6. I'm just going to say like this is JavaScript.
In
These are
2019.
yeah. If you're creating a string, you can use single, double, or backticks, and here's the reasons why you might want to use one or the other. So what would I do? I would probably spend some time going through the fundamentals. It may seem like you don't necessarily need to do that because you're not a beginner programmer, but it's well worth doing, and you're going to go through it really quickly because you already know what a function is, you already know what passing arguments is, you already know what interpolation is. You just need to know how do we do it in JavaScript, and then past that, I would pick up a framework, React, Vue, whatever it is, and sort of cut your teeth in it. It's probably also worth doing some on like vanilla DOM stuff, meaning that like you probably should figure out how to buttons and clicks and updating elements. How does all that stuff work in vanilla JavaScript? Because then when you get into a framework, you'll understand what's going on under the hood.
So I have a perspective because I'm not really I'm definitely not a well, I mean, I could build websites. Okay, all right, I'll say I'm a web developer ish.
Yeah.
Um, but like so from my perspective, learning those basic JavaScript uh, things, I guess I would call them for lack of a better word. When I was introduced to jQuery, I was like, wow, this is way easier now. Everything is just I find much more intuitive and easier to use, I guess, is a way to put it. So my question is then, well, why not just jump right into like something like jQuery?
Um, I mean, you certainly can. That's how I learned JavaScript as well. But I don't think that jQuery is very relevant anymore. So if you were to learn it, I think like vanilla JavaScript is almost as easy as jQuery is right now. There's a couple little things in terms of selectors and whatnot, but you can quickly make a little library that will get you up and running. So um, I think that maybe 5 years ago, I would have say for sure learn jQuery. And I've taught JavaScript to beginners 5 years ago, and we showed them obviously you show them functions and variables and stuff, but then you could jump right into jQuery because you get easy wins with that.
Mhm.
You'll be able to see it working, and it's not really all that confusing without getting tripped up on the gotchas. But I think that vanilla JavaScript is at the point now where you can get those easy wins without having to use any sort of library.
So you think jQuery is not relevant? That's what you just said. What would
Yeah, well,
you
like
say? You
if
think that JavaScript is good enough now that you don't need it?
yeah, I think so. I think if you have a project with jQuery in it, it's not worth switching it over. Just keep using it. I use jQuery on a lot of my websites. But if I was starting a project from scratch today, with the browser support and all of the new APIs that are in JavaScript, as well as all of the libraries that are out there now. They don't use jQuery anymore. They've all been refactored into just vanilla JavaScript. So
Hmm.
um, it's probably not worth learning jQuery anymore.
Because I just rebuilt my website like 3 months ago, and it uses quite a bit of jQuery, I'd say. And but the reason it does is because all of the examples that I would find
Yeah,
were in
Stack
jQuery.
Overflow is full of jQuery.
It's all jQuery, and then so I'm like, oh, this must be the thing that everybody uses now. But now I'm hearing from you, a JavaScript expert, that it's no longer like needed. So yeah, well, I guess I'm
Yeah, it's not that jQuery is bad. It's just that you don't need it anymore, because there is always an equivalent in vanilla JavaScript now.
okay. I see. Well, that's fine. Whatever. My website will survive. It will live on.
Yeah, it works. And you're probably no one will be able to tell going to your website. It's not that big of a download for the browser to work. You're not going to have sluggish performance. There's all of the reasons why people usually say not to use it.
Oh, okay. Um, all right. So let's take a look here for uh, for some more questions. What if I have written a JavaScript library that I believe can change the world, as it helps?
Oh,
That's a tall order. As it helps switch from HTML/CSS coding to JavaScript objects coding. Okay. How do I tell the world about it in the most efficient way? So this doesn't have to be a specific question to his specific situation where he's created a JavaScript library that's going to change the world. A, a, a bigger question here could be, how do I tell the world about my idea that could potentially change the world also?
yeah. That's a great question. Usually, when you have new ideas like this, people come at them with, they think it's dumb that you're trying to change the way that we think. I was at the unveiling of React. I was at JSConf in like 2012 or something like that, 2011, um, and everyone was like, "This is dumb. Why would you put HTML inside your JavaScript? That's against the rules, right, of separation of concerns, right?" And there's this a couple devs from Facebook being like, "No, really, we think this is a good idea. We think it's cool." And cut to 5 years later, now everybody does it, right? So I don't really know how you would do that, because you definitely have to have thick skin. People are going to think your idea is dumb initially. Um, it also doesn't hurt to have one of the biggest companies in the world behind you, being able to support development like that. But like, I don't know, I see some of like other libraries that don't have a big company behind them. I think of something like Lodash or underscore JS, or even just Vue, who don't have big companies behind them. It's just somebody who creates something and shares it with the world. And probably at least a few people are going to listen to what you have. And if it actually is a really good idea, chances are that a few more people are going to catch on, and then a few more and a few more. And these sort of good ideas sort of catch on themselves. I think. I don't know if that's a really good answer or not, but um,
I think that's how I would answer it mostly. The only thing I would add is make sure it's easily accessible. Basically, limit friction for people getting their hands on it, and if it's good, it will gain popularity. I think that's generally just how it works. If something is good,
totally,
people will use it, and so reduce friction for getting the thing. That's it. Whether it's making it free, making great documentation. I hate bad documentation. If something has bad documentation, it infuriates me. So, and I just won't use it. So, unless like millions of people are saying I should use it, which you wouldn't have starting something new. So, great documentation, uh, reduce friction. Um, yeah, just make it available.
totally,
Give people examples of using it. That comes down to documentation, though. It's your documentation should have examples. Your documentation should be easy to read. It should be well organized. Also, if you want to get on camera, make video examples of using your thing. Yeah, it's just promoting your product, making it available, reduce friction. That's what I would say. So there. So did I lose Wes again?
no, I'm still here.
Oh, so let's carry on here with the questions. I lost my spot. Okay. Uh, Do you think a NoSQL type database like Cloud Firestore will continue to gain popularity, or do you think something will replace it within a couple of years? Have you used Firestore a lot? Like any of the Firebase tools?
Yeah, I've used Firebase. Seems pretty popular. I use it in my React for Beginners course. It's nice because it's real time and whatnot. The one huge downside is that it's not open source, meaning that it's a hard pill for people to build their business upon a database that's controlled by a company. And we've seen it. People built their entire business on Parse, and then Parse was just a database as a service. It was super easy to get up and running. And then Facebook bought them, and a couple of years later, they pulled the plug. And if you had built they eventually open sourced it, but I would have felt pretty burned if that had happened. So um, I think that I probably would go for something more that's open source and has those features built in. It's going to be a little bit more work up front to do it. Even things like you see something like Prisma, which is a layer that sits on top of MySQL or MongoDB or Postgres. And then it will give you both the real time as well as a GraphQL API in order to interact with it. That's probably a better bet. In terms of like,
Safer anyway.
yeah, because then you're also like, people don't necessarily always start with a blank database either. You can just like start with your existing MySQL database that has your data in it already and sit this on top of it. The other question is NoSQL going to become more popular? I don't really know all that much about databases. I use MongoDB myself, but I know that I don't think that MySQL, Postgres, those traditional databases are going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah, I have quite a bit to say about this because I've used Firebase a lot. Um, I think Firebase in general has incredible tools. Like their tools are like they're amazing. I think their documentation is awesome. Their tools are awesome. Everything works really well. It's all easy. It's just like a really really great thing. But then the question or the point that Wes brought up is you have a company that controls everything and they could just one day be like, not making enough money. Let's just shut it down and
Yeah.
then you're effed basically. It's like, well, sorry guys, but shutting her down basically, and then you're screwed. It's like whatever users, whatever data, whatever everything, it's going to be a panic to like take that data out of Firestore, which there's nothing like it. So you're going to have to write some kind of a program to extract the data, put it somewhere else, rebuild everything. It would be a nightmare basically. Um, but um, so yeah, that's the downside. I'm not saying that it's going to go anywhere, which I have another thing to say about that. But I think it's amazing. They're incredible. Everything's great. Documentation is good, but you could get screwed. Now I'll give you my opinion of whether or not I think they're going to get rid of it. So from what I've seen on the Android side of the world is um, all of like the Android documentation is pretty. It's more and more getting incorporated with Firebase. So they're merging Firebase and the ways that things used to be done. Like Google Cloud Messaging, for example, used to be the way that you would send out push notifications to users. Now they've built a new thing called Firebase has a thing called Firebase Cloud Messaging. They've now deprecated Google Cloud Messaging. So now you use Firebase Cloud Messaging. The takeaway here is that more and more they're integrating Firebase into Android life, basically.
Hmm.
So it's more and more looking like this is the direction they're going, and it's probably not going anywhere. So I would say that it seems unlikely that it would get shut down.
Yeah, and also even if it does get shut down, that worry of it being shut down, a lot of times people sit on their hands for 3 months before a project, just picking the perfect tech stack when
Yeah,
you probably could have slung that thing out in an afternoon with Firebase and a little bit of React, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so that's worth it in a lot of cases. And if they get shut down, there will be a proper shutdown procedure in
yeah.
which you'll have to figure it out. But yeah, it's probably worth it in a lot of cases.
Yeah, like let's just be realistic here. 99.9% of you who are listening or people who are using the Firebase tools to get started learning programming, you're not going to have a platform that is generating an amount of income that it matters. Like you
Yeah.
if they disappeared, who cares? your app might go away and it would suck. I'm not saying that your apps are worthless or your websites are worthless, but I'm saying that it's not going to be the end of the world for you. And the speed that you gain from using the Firebase tools is worth it, because you won't be sitting on your hands thinking like, oh, do I need to use MongoDB? Do I need to use SQL? Do I need to use blah 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 blah, relational, non-relational, whatever? All these questions, who cares? Use Firebase and build it, and you'll learn a lot, and you'll become a better developer more quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there. We got lots of questions. Is web development knowledge required for a career in Android? Some people say you got to be prepared in most programming fields, whether it is apps or sites. I'm a little concerned. What do you think, Wes?
Um, I don't really know all that much about Android world or whatnot, but I would assume that if even if you're building an app, you're going to need to still use like a server that you have to build, and that's not really technically web, but you are building like probably some sort of API that you need to interact with. So that's part of it. And at a certain point, you might have to interact with some web properties that you need to pull data from or whatnot. So I would say like an understanding of it probably, but you might not be building your entire application in JavaScript as well. So I guess it depends on what you have. I certainly think that if I was hiring an Android developer, someone who also had web development skills would probably be very nice, knowing that should things change, we could shift over. Like there's probably people that run studios looking at something like React Native and saying, huh, it might be possible, or it is possible for us to shift over to using React Native in a year or two. So then I don't want to have an employee that doesn't have that skill set. It would be nice to have someone that does have that skill set.
Yeah, I think that was really well answered. It's like if you have web development knowledge, also database knowledge, all that stuff, that's needed. Really, it's not like required depending on your position on the Android team that you'd be working on. But if a problem comes up and the answer happens to be MongoDB is a better database for that situation than an SQL database, and you know that because you know the differences, that's valuable, right? So from the perspective of an employer, all of the skills is always better. But generally, no, you don't need to, but more is better, is what I would probably say. Oh, by the way, we're coming up on an hour here. Do you have time to maybe finish up these questions, or
Sure. Yeah, I got a couple more minutes to finish up some questions.
All right. So let's see. Let's find the ones that will help the most people. Maybe you can help me go through these because I'm not the web development expert that you are. Let's see. Do you know Python? Do you know, or you're
No.
strictly JavaScript guy, right? You said, yeah.
Yeah, like
Okay.
I've dabbled in it. Sometimes you get an open source project, or in my consulting days, I've definitely did a lot of front end for different people, and often it requires jumping into their back end to set something up. So, like I can read it and figure out what's going on, but I couldn't write something from scratch.
Okay. Let's see. 60% of websites still use PHP, so it's useful, but I think JavaScript is a better investment. What do you think about PHP? Because I know the PHP discussion is kind of it can be sort of a heated one in the programming community. There is sort of like a limitless amount of memes making fun of PHP as a language. Yet, as he just said, there's like 60% of the internet is PHP. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, PHP gets a bad rap. I think because it's most people's first programming language, and they are generally a bad programmer when they're learning it, and they look back on it and say that's
Ugh.
garbage.
Yeah.
And also, there is a lot of terrible stuff written in PHP. It's had a bad history. The API is a mess in terms of like spelling and underscores and capitals and all that stuff like that. But um, it's changed a lot. Like the more modern versions of PHP, and you look at frameworks like Laravel, and you can for sure build like a really slick, scalable, nice application with PHP. So there's huge demand for it. If you go anywhere and look specifically right now in Laravel, if you look for people hiring for Laravel, it's all over the place. I was at a Laravel conference the other day, or about I don't know, 6 months ago, and there's tons of developers there. So I don't think that if you like PHP and you know PHP, that's perfectly fine. And I think if you're looking at languages to learn, I would probably be at the top. I would for sure recommend JavaScript first, but that's because I'm extremely biased. But I wouldn't beat up on PHP as much as most people do.
Good answer. I don't know. I don't know. My answer is I don't know. I know very very little PHP. If you were to ask me, I'd say just from an aesthetic standpoint, it looks very ugly. It looks archaic. But I really don't know anything. So don't listen to me. um,
Yeah, the ugly one is, people always say stuff looks ugly, but if you look at code that like actual good PHP developers are writing, it looks nothing like the mangled HTML and PHP that you probably have seen.
the stuff that I wrote, you mean?
Yeah,
uh, yeah. Yeah, actually, that is. You said PHP is often the first thing people learn. That was what I first learned too, and I quickly gave it up. I looked
yeah.
back.
There's
Look,
there's
sorry.
this kind of like air that people seem to think that beating up on a language or thinking something is inferior makes them look smart. It makes them look like a better developer. But it just makes you look like an asshole. So it's probably not worth doing that.
I got okay. I got two more questions, and then I'm gonna quickly ask you like two questions about yourself, and then I'll let you go if that's
Sure.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So number one is, do you think the web developer This is a good question because I think a lot of people ask this. Do you think that the web developer profession has a future, or will it be replaced in the next 5 years? And I'm sure that he's referring to products like Squarespace, um, things like that, who allow you to build a website with no programming or very little
Yeah.
programming. What do you think about that?
I think that's definitely changing. Things like Squarespace and I don't know, what are the other ones out there.
Well, WordPress,
Um,
obviously, but
you need a
that's
website. What's that? Why not build it yourself? What's that ad I get on YouTube all the time? Wix.
oh,
Wix and WordPress has all these builders and things like that. I think that space is definitely changing. Um, I've 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 asked people who are in that sort of build the $1,000, $2,000 website space, and they said they're still plenty busy. So I don't see any evidence from their side, but just from seeing like friends of mine who own businesses, you definitely see a lot more people enjoying using these builders. But what I do see is at a certain point, people realize um,
they're inferior.
oh, they can't do as much as I had thought, or
Yeah,
people want custom functionality and they can't do that. So I think for your basic pamphlet website, absolutely. But people's needs in tech are growing, and websites are becoming more than just a spot to have a phone number. And when that's the case, then they need to hire out for more advanced stuff. So I don't think that web developer profession is going to move. But I do think that the people who have the very basic change the drapes, change the colors on a WordPress theme, I do think that those people will probably start to feel the pinch in the next year or two. Um, and if I was them, I would definitely spend some time investing in my skill set and becoming like a bit of a better developer and being able to do custom functionality.
that was a really great answer. You've had a lot of really, really like I would say like spot on. Like you nailed it. Like you were 100 feet away. You threw a football and you hit a nail on the head. Like that was everything about what you just said was accurate, especially where the people will feel the pinch. So those people who are doing the minor changes that don't require like a high degree of skill, those are the people that are going to feel the pinch because those products coming up like Squarespace are getting more. They're getting better and better.
Yeah.
But at the same time, um, tech is not going anywhere. people's demands for websites are increasing in complexity. Because now it's like everybody has to have a website pretty much. If you have a business, you don't have a website, you're in trouble, or you don't exist. And to make your website stand out, you need to have unique things. To get unique things, you need developers who are on the frontier who are making those unique things. So probably not going anywhere. At least
Yeah.
I agree with everything you said,
It
basically.
might, but I
Yeah.
don't know. That's it. I think like as long as you think of yourself as a coder, not even a web development a developer in general, just a coder in general, you can probably shift. And you see these things coming from a mile away. Like people have been talking about Squarespace, and there was like this grid.io that was going to like artificial intelligence build websites for you. And for years, people were asking me, like, am I going to be out of a job? And that thing totally flopped. So you'll be able to see the writing on the wall. It's not going to be like one day we wake up and we're all
Yeah.
out of a
Yeah.
job.
Yeah, yeah. Which you implied with your answer too, with the pinch thing. It's like people are gonna start feeling pressure, kind of in certain areas. You're gonna get an idea. You're gonna see the things happening, and you're gonna be able to react. It's not like you're gonna wake up tomorrow and AI has changed web development. Now programmers are no longer needed. Won't happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, uh, last question. This will be the last question. What are your predictions for JavaScript in the next 10 years? So right now, I believe it's kind of the most popular language. I mean, it's the most widely used language in the world, I believe. And what do you think? 10 years down the road, what do you think
Oh
is going to happen
man.
to it?
I have no clue what 10 years will be. Cause
Like, you
like,
mean you can't predict the future?
yeah, like 10 years in technology is a lifetime. Everything totally turns over. Like with 10 years ago, it was 2009. And like that was a long time ago. Like, I don't know, some random guess. I think TypeScript is going to keep gaining popularity. And at a certain point, we might see it built baked in right into the browser. Some sort of typed language. TypeScript is a typed version of JavaScript, and it has huge benefits both from an authoring level as well as just like catching rogue stuff, because JavaScript is kind of the wild west of programming languages. So I think TypeScript is probably be a big one. I think developer experience is going to be a huge one, where the tools, even if you even just look at like VS Code, how good it's got in the last like 2 years in terms of improving your experience as a developer. That's I think that will probably continue to grow. I think more like frameworks that are easy to get an application up and running, sort of batteries included, where it comes with the data. There already are these things, but I think we'll probably migrate to seeing more and more of those. Um, Past that, I don't really know. I tell people I don't future, just react to what happens. And I think that's all you have to worry about as a developer as well. Don't worry about what's coming down. Just look at, oh, what's happened in the last 6 months, and how do I, as a developer, react to those changes?
Uh, Again, I think, yeah, I think you just like, I have something to add, but I think your answers are great. They just like, I feel like you're in my head.
There you go.
So what would I add? So I think like Wes pointed out, it's impossible to predict. Being good at reacting to changes and things is going to be the best the best way to approach it for your life as a developer, because it's always going to change. And the only thing I would say is that what will happen is you'll continue to get layers of abstraction added on top of languages. So like if you look at the history of programming languages, it always starts at very low level from assembly, where you're writing line by line and it goes down in a linear fashion and it executes things and whatever. You get layers built on top that make certain things easier to do. So like he said, firing up simple things, or things that maybe are complicated now will become simpler later. Yeah, so I think it's just going to continue moving in the same direction, and more layers of abstraction piled on top that make, an example of Android, maybe they're going to streamline setting up a recycler view in a view, make it much easier. They'll be call it like recycler view activity or whatever, and it'll already be, they'll have all these inputs that are easy for you to just be like, there goes my data, and put it in there, and it just works. But then with that, there'll be more complicated things because now some things are made easier. So there's always going to be kind of, okay, now what's the next thing that gets more complicated now? It's like moving the needle forward, I guess, is the way to put it.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I think like the more like the easier it gets, the more hungry we get for stuff that's more complex, right? And that's
Yeah.
the same thing with like those Squarespace sites are filling that void, but now people are hungry for custom functionality on their websites.
Yeah. It's like supply and demand. People always want what a lot of other people uh, don't have. It's like
Hmm.
you want the thing that makes you stand out. Like, why did I buy this shirt? Because I think it's cool and it makes me stand out. Why do I want custom functionality on my website? Because I think it's cool and it makes me stand out. It's the same game, I think. So yeah, the last thing I want to ask you before we I let you go because I've taken up enough of your time. What do you do for fun? What I know like to program, obviously,
Yeah,
and what do you do when you're not sitting at your computer? I guess. What do you?
yeah. It's mostly I've got a family, two kids, one on the way. So it's mostly playing with them. I'm also super into cooking, so I have a couple smokers in my backyard. I like to
Oh, you're one of
smoke.
those.
Yeah, big smoker. Not like a cigarette smoker, but like meat smoking and cheese
Yeah.
smoking and whatnot. Like making stuff in the kitchen, dinners and whatnot. That's pretty much it. I don't have much time for anything else.
And you're in
That's kind
Hamilton,
of where I
right?
spend my time. Yeah,
And so what? I don't even. I'm from Canada, and I don't even know where that is.
where
Hamilton
are you
is
from?
Vancouver, near Vancouver.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like I'm
Um,
about 45 minutes from Vancouver.
Okay. Yeah, I'm so Hamilton is about 45 minutes outside of Toronto.
Okay,
And it's about 45 minutes from Buffalo, New York, which is what I usually tell Americans, so they've got a kind of an
oh yeah,
idea of where it's at.
right. So if I visit Eastern Canada, I can come over and you'll make me a nice smoked meal.
Well, we're not typical BC. We're not in Eastern Canada. That's
Well, it's by
like
New York, isn't it? New York's like eastern
not
coast.
really. No, you should look at a map.
Oh,
No, we're about 9 hours from New York.
oh man.
But
Okay.
Eastern Canada is like Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and stuff like that. We're like
Oh, Toronto,
central.
Toronto. Okay, yeah. Never mind. Never
Yeah.
mind. I wasn't putting it together there. Okay. So we'll say Toronto area.
But if you come around to Ontario, yeah, I'll make you some barbecue.
That sounds good. Perfect. All right. So, well, thanks again for coming. I enjoyed getting to know you, and maybe in a year or something. Oh wait, no. Hold on. We can't let you go
Yeah,
yet. Can't let you
sure,
go yet. You this is your chance to plug whatever you've got going on, whatever's new.
sure,
If you have a question for the people who are watching, they can answer in the comments section, or yeah, just generally plug what's going on with you, what's new, what do you got
sure.
going on?
So I make web development courses, bunch of free ones, bunch of paid ones. They're all available at wesbos.com/courses. If you want to learn a little bit more JavaScript, go to javascript30.com. That'll be that's a free one that'll sort of get you up and running with getting better at JavaScript. And then I also have a podcast called Syntax. We do that twice a week, Mondays and Wednesdays, and we talk about everything related to web development. It's pretty heavy, focused on JavaScript and CSS, but we also do a lot of like life skills, working out, productivity, things like that. So that's at syntax.fm, or just subscribe in wherever you find your podcasts.
Cool. I will subscribe to your podcast. Do you have it on Spotify?
Yep. Yeah, it's pretty popular on Spotify. It's surprising.
How do
It's
you
it's more popular on Spotify than it is on some of the other platforms.
So I have my podcast on Spotify. Like this is going to go on Spotify. But how do you know like how I don't know where to see analytics. How do I see analytics on my podcast?
It depends on like what do you use to host your podcast?
Blueberry, I think it's called.
Okay. Is that like a self-hosted thing
It's a
or a
it,
service?
it's a so it's a It's a thing I upload. So I don't even know. Upload them there, and then they give it to Spotify.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So Spotify open stats for people who uploaded their feeds directly. But if you're through like Libsyn or Blueberry or one of these, they have the stats for you, and soon they will open up the stats to the rest of us. So right now I have to go through Libsyn dashboard to see our Spotify numbers.
Okay, so I have to look on Blueberry basically.
Yeah, it's weird because like I have separate stats for just for Spotify, which is odd, but
Okay,
uh,
all right,
it works okay.
cool. All right, well, thanks for coming on here. I appreciate your time, and like I said, maybe in a year or something we can do this again, and I can hear what's new with JavaScript and what you got going on.
Cool. Thanks a lot. I'll talk to you later.
All right, bye bye.